Hello and welcome to Matcha Mornings, part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network. I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith, and I'm excited to dive deep on topics around holistic health, the power of food, hormone health, how the practices of yoga can impact our health and well-being, and much more. So grab your cup of tea, settle in, and let's get started. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Matcha Mornings podcast. I am very, very, very excited for today's episode of the show. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Bridgette Shaw. Bridgette is a 500-hour E-RYT with Yoga Alliance. She specializes in Yoga Nidra, meditation, restorative yoga, and hormone yoga therapy. Bridgette started practicing yoga in 1998 and took her first training in 2005 and has been a lifelong learner of yoga since 2005 with that first Anusara style training. And her most recent training was in June of 2019 when she completed a training in hormone yoga therapy. And on this episode of the podcast, we're talking about Bridgette's journey with health and wellness. We're talking about her struggles with hormones and hormone balancing and how discovering hormone yoga therapy was very life-changing for her. We're talking about what hormone yoga therapy is, how it can help women with hormone imbalances, how Bridgette was able to get trained in it and has started to share those teachings. And I've worked on and off with Bridgette over the last couple of years on some business of yoga stuff. And I knew that she did hormone yoga, but I didn't really know what it was. And it was really amazing to dive in with Bridgette about this practice. And since I recorded with her, I have been learning a little bit more about this, and it's a pretty incredible and super unique type of practice. So if you are somebody who struggles with hormones or you're curious how it could benefit you or help you feel even better month to month, I would definitely recommend checking out this practice. The last thing I wanted to say and make note of before we dive into this interview is that this will be the final episode of Matcha Mornings for this year. It's the final episode for 2020. And I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for writing in. Thank you for leaving reviews and subscribing and sharing with your friends. And hopefully, thank you for enjoying the episodes. I am so appreciative of this journey with Matcha Mornings, and I'm really excited to be back in 2021 with some exciting new episodes. So stay tuned until next year. All right, without further ado, here is Bridgette. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Bridgette, welcome to the podcast today. I'm really excited to be chatting with you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I'm super excited to finally get a chance to talk to you about all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. You and I have been doing a little bit of, business of yoga work in the background over the last year or so. We got connected through a mutual friend. And as I've been looking at your website and stuff, I've just been kind of drooling over your hormone yoga offerings and everything you do because it's so aligned with the holistic side of things that I'm really passionate about. So I'm excited to dive into all of this.
I am as well. I just would like to say thank you for all of your help and to our mutual friend because she connected us, and it's because of your help that I was able to get that website up and running and offering all of this to women now. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my loves is to be able to help, yoga teachers and health practitioners be able to do the work that they love to do and not worry about like all the nitty-gritty business stuff, because I think most of us know that we don't become yoga teachers to design websites and stuff like that.
No, we'd still be waiting for these offerings if I was left to my own devices. So
I totally get that. And so can you share with listeners where you're joining us from today?
Yeah, I am originally from Chicago. I lived in New York for a number of years before moving to Calgary, probably close to 10 years ago now.
Amazing. What brought you to Calgary?
So I was working at a jazz club, the Blue Note Jazz Club in New York, and my husband came through to play, and it was love at first sight. And I kept him in New York for about 4 years, and he's from Calgary. So we decided that we would come back here when we knew that we wanted to start a family.
Oh, amazing. I love it. That's awesome to hear. And I'm curious if you can share a little bit about your background with yoga and kind of your journey with yoga.
Yeah, absolutely. I went to a conservatory for theater when I was in school back in Chicago. And one of the first classes that I ever took, we were required to take yoga. And it really kind of was the practice that saved me while I was in that program, because that first year my mom passed away within the first few months of school. And my yoga teacher took me under his wing. So whenever I had any free time, I was dropping in and taking other classes with him. I was going to his house for privates. I was going to group classes with him that he ran. And then I was introduced to a woman in my program who was a couple of years ahead of me, who was a yoga teacher. And we were in a show together. We hit it off. And when everyone else was running out, having cigarettes and coffee, we were doing headstands and back bends to get our energy up.
I love it.
Yeah. There was stuff going on there too, but during showtime, we would always try to do our yoga as a way to focus and energize and calm and all of that. So she really became a huge mentor for me. And when she graduated, she started working at a yoga studio. And when I got out of school, she asked if I wanted to do some kind of karma work with them. And so I did. And I kept meeting with her each week to go over different topics, whether it was like history of yoga, philosophy, postures, anatomy. And we would set these goals. And I was not in a training program at the time. So it was all just what I was learning over the years at school and then with her. And we got to this point where she's like, well, why don't you come and start demoing in my classes? And it started there. And then I started teaching a posture, and then I would teach a few postures. And then eventually, over a really long period of time, I ended up taking over some of her classes. And when I sort of hit a plateau with my learning, I then went and did my first 200-hour teacher training. From there, I ended up moving to New York and found my yoga home there, although not time for this story now, but I actually found my teachers many years before without realizing it. Once I started that journey, I did the next 300 hours. So this was a couple of years later, the next 300 hours with Ishta Yoga. And I've been with them ever since. I've done their master's program. I've done a lot of other little trainings, like little weekend trainings here and there. I got really into Yoga Nidra and restorative yoga, and I did trainings in those two practices and some prenatal stuff. So I just never really stopped. And then I found Hormone Yoga a couple of years ago and got certified in that. And I'm just continuing on this journey of learning, really. It's never ending.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I love the idea of being like a forever student, and especially with something like yoga, because I think the well is very, very deep in terms of things we can learn as practitioners and teachers. So I think that that's really beautiful. And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about what Ishta Yoga is.
Absolutely. Ishta is the integrated science of Hatha, Tantra, and Ayurveda. And the founder, Alan Finger, and his father, Manny Finger, grew up in South Africa. And Manny found yoga when Al was a young child. And then Al sort of joined in when he was a teenager. And they turned their home into a bit of an ashram. And they had all of these teachers coming and living with them. And so that's how Al grew up. And Al is the teacher that I now study directly under. And so his father passed before I ever met him. But Al ended up bringing all of these teachings that he had gathered to California, I want to say back in the 60s. And then from there, he ended up moving to New York. And I met him once he got to New York. And so now he's married to Sarah Plattfinger, who is one of my mentors as well. And the other teacher who's also one of the owners, I guess you could say, of Ishta is Mona Anand, and she's my Yoga Nidra teacher. and a mentor also. They have a staff of master teachers that have been with Al for a really long time. And we really, in all of our classes, so we look at the individual. So I know that you're familiar with Ayurveda, which is the sister science to yoga. And we really look at how unique an individual each of us are. And because of that, we can't all have the same practice in order to find balance. So we have all of these different tools and techniques that we use so that when we're within the group, each person can figure out what they need. And we always have pranayama in our practices. We use a lot of kriya techniques, and meditation is a daily practice for us. We have a beautiful practice in grounding called Artavatva Samyama that is so much more than just grounding yourself after a practice, but a way that we can take the wisdom and the intelligence that we access when we're able to get into that quiet place and then sort of deposit it into each of our chakras so that it can then inform us as we go about living our lives, since we have to be able to take the practice off the mat so that we can really experience the full benefits of it.
Yeah, that's incredible. That sounds amazing. And I'm curious a little bit more about hormone yoga therapy as well, because I think with my own journey, yoga has been a big part of helping heal my hormones, balance my hormones. But I didn't know there was an actual practice of hormone yoga therapy until I discovered your business.
Yes, I did not know either. And to be honest with you, when I first found out about it and then realized how powerful and effective it was, I was actually kind of angry that I didn't know about it. I felt like this needs to be out there. How come there's this incredible, accessible practice that people are not talking about? And it's because I think a pill is a lot easier and makes more people money. And now I'm over the anger, and now I'm just full of joy and spreading it as far and wide as I can.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that people look for really quick results. I think we see that in pretty much all aspects of our society. And I think that if I've learned anything throughout my journey with hormones, I mean, it's been like an 8-year journey. And I think what I've learned is that it's going to be a lifetime journey.
Yes.
It's not just oh, hey, I get to fix this and now I'm fine. It's every single month is different.
Absolutely. Yeah. Agreed.
And so can you tell me a little bit about what hormone yoga therapy is and what kind of the principles of practice are with that?
Yeah. So hormone yoga therapy, we call it HIT, H-Y-T, is a practice where we blend traditional hatha yoga postures that you might be familiar with if you drop into a yoga class, and Kundalini yoga. And we turn them into this very dynamic practice. There are static postures as well. And we use a very strong pranayama technique called Vastrika breath. And we also bring in different elements of Tibetan energy work, meditation, Yoga Nidra. We work with the chakras. And so basically what we're doing is we take these postures and we bring in this really strong dynamic breath, and we start to massage the glands through the practice. And the glands that we focus on are the ovaries, the thyroid, and the pituitary. We also work with the adrenals a little bit as well. And by putting this sequence together, this 25-minute sequence, we are able to get the glands to start to come back to life, to start to activate and produce more hormones. And they start to communicate with each other, and then the body takes over in its own wisdom, and we start to lose the symptoms that we experience in imbalanced hormones. For a lot of people, it's hot flashes, anxiety, PMS, bloating. I'm sure we'll get into more of that stuff later. But once you learn the practice, like I said, it takes about 25 minutes. But then we also want to make sure that we're including stress-reducing exercises and practices as well, because stress affects our hormones so so much. And so I almost look at it like, if you take certain vitamins, you need another vitamin in order for it all to like kind of like just work really well together. And so I look at this as just another little vitamin that we take with our HIIT practice.
Okay. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I'm definitely already keen to learn more about this. It's right up my alley. And I think I would love to hear a little bit about what attracted you to this practice in the first place. Was it your own journey with health and wellness and hormones, or what was it that kind of, made you intrigued by this?
Yeah, I have struggled with my hormones pretty much my whole life, but I kind of accepted that that was just the way I was. I didn't realize that there was a way to change that. I have a high risk for breast cancer, so taking the pill was out of the question for me to help with like heavy bleeding or cramping or any of like acne or any of the other things that they would typically maybe give you the pill for. So I was always trying to find, I guess, just ways to get through it as quickly as I could each week, each 2 weeks, whatever it happened to be. My PMS was terrible. And so I learned how to sort of manage it for a really long time. And then I got pregnant, and I was 37 when I had my son. And it was like that from that moment on, things got progressively worse. And I didn't know if it was my age. I didn't know if it was because I had just had a child. I didn't know if it was postpartum depression. Like, I just could not figure out what was going on, but I was not okay. And it just continued to get worse and worse. So for me, the symptoms were bloating, breast tenderness, major weight fluctuation every single month when I would get my period. I was not on a good schedule. So like sometimes I get my period after 27 days, sometimes after 37 days. So I never really knew when it was coming. I had horrific mood swings. Rage was out of control. And that part was probably the worst for me. And then I also started getting really nauseous, and I would throw up, which would only occasionally happen in the past. But after I had my son, it was like every month I would throw up. But then that window of, the day before vomiting spread back until it would be like 2 weeks after I got my period. I would wake up. The second I opened my eyes, I would start vomiting. And it would last all the way until the last day of my period. So pretty much 2 weeks out of every month, I was throwing up all the time.
Oh my gosh. That sounds horrible.
It was awful. I'd be teaching yoga class. I'd put people in child's pose. I'd run to the bathroom, come back. And
gosh.
Yeah.
Throwing up is like actually the worst thing ever. I'm pretty sure. Maybe I've just lived a really easy life. I don't know. I think it's just the worst feeling though.
I know, my poor son just like grew up with me, like constantly over the toilet. And it was hard. It was just starting to impact every part of my life and, my relationships with my family, with my friends, at work. Like, it was just everywhere. It was spreading into every part of my life and creating chaos and suffering. and so I heard that one of the studios that I worked at was offering this 2-day workshop called Hormone Yoga Therapy. And I was like, well, I've been doing yoga for like 25 years. Nothing has helped me so far. What are they going to show me that I feel like I haven't already researched on my own? And I didn't really understand what I was getting into, but I was PMSing that weekend. So I was like, well, I can be in the yoga studio for the weekend and like doing this stuff just for me. And maybe that will make me feel a little bit better, even if I don't get anything else out of the workshop. And I tend to go into things with a much more open mind, but around this topic, I was just kind of like at my wit's end. And I had actually just gone to the doctor to see if he would test my hormone levels, because I thought for sure I was going through like an early menopause or something. I'm like, there is something so wrong in my system right now. And I know it's connected to my hormones. I feel it in every cell of my being. And we just need to figure out what I have to do. And I really, like, I can't go on HRT, but like maybe the first step is just getting the panel. So basically what ended up happening in that situation was the doctor prescribed me, like gave me a prescription for a psychologist. He's like, you need to go see someone and talk to someone. And then he sent me in for panels and didn't tell me that he actually didn't send me in for a hormone panel, just sent me in for blood work. And I didn't look at things, and I probably should have at the time. And when I found out later that he didn't actually send me in for what I asked for, and that he thought I just needed to see someone, which maybe I did also, but honestly, in my situation, once my hormones started to find balance again, the anxiety, the rage, like all the things that I would have needed to talk to someone about were gone. Basically fired him, found a new doctor, and took this workshop. And I told myself, I'm giving it 6 months to practice every day. And if nothing changes, I gave it my all, and we'll go on to the next thing. So the first night after learning half the practice, I went home, and it was almost like someone like flicked my ovaries. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like they were flicked back to life or something. And I felt them. There was like a little maybe tightness around them or something. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but I felt them. And I went back the next day. I was like, is this normal? And she said, that people talk about this. They have this experience. Keep going with it and see what happens. And then I learned the rest of the practice. And within a week, I was like, oh my God, I feel incredible. And my symptoms of PMS started to lessen right away. The next month, I had no symptoms. I did not even know that my period was coming until I went to the bathroom and saw it. It was the first time in my life that has ever happened. And this was like, maybe 6 weeks of practicing, 5 weeks of practicing every day. And I just haven't stopped. I mean, I would say I'm coming up on my 2-year anniversary with HIIT on December 1st, which I'm really excited about. And I think that I've missed maybe 10 days, maybe, of practice. I don't know. Dina Rodriguez, who created this system, she's a 93-year-old Brazilian psychologist and yogini. She says 4 days minimum to kind of get the results. But the more you practice, the better the results are. So I always encourage people to try it for every day, because then if you miss a day or two, you're still getting enough time in. And like you said earlier, this is a lifetime thing, right? So once your hormones are balanced, if you stop doing the practice, things go out of balance again. So it's just as if you were taking a pill. You have to take that pill every day in order for it to work. But the benefit of doing the practice instead of the pill each day is that you also get stronger, develop this incredible practice, are producing your own hormones. Because if they give you estrogen, that estrogen doesn't really know how to communicate with the natural hormones in your body. And so the rest of the hormones don't understand how to level out, how to create balance. And when we produce our own estrogen, it can protect our heart. And when we take the HRT, it doesn't have that same effect. I would never tell anyone not to go on medication if that's what is right for them. But if you are able to do this practice and not need to go on the medication, so many more benefits through this practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really amazing to hear. And I think 2 things kind of came to mind as you were telling your story. One, to me, is just how, as women, I think in particularly, but just humans in general, like, we really need to advocate for our health. I have, similar doctor stories in Alberta as well. And I just think that like, I love how you said, like, I fired my doctor. And I think that we really do need to be like, I fired my doctor because they weren't working for me. Like, your doctor works for you. And if they're not going to help you with the things you need help with, like, you need to find somebody new. And it's taken me a long time to kind of realize that with sort of similar situations with, and particularly with having a male doctor and, not standing up for the things that I needed because we kind of give doctors this credit of like they're certified in this thing, which yes, they are. And that's amazing. But like we're like the CEOs of our bodies, like we know when something is off. And if your doctor's telling you, no, you're fine, I feel like we really need to advocate for our own health. Like I feel so strongly about that. And your story just kind of reflects that back to me a little bit.
Yeah. I learned that from my mother, who got very sick when I was a little girl, and she had a similar situation where her doctor was not giving her what she needed, and she changed that big time.
Yeah, so important. And the second thing that from what you said that really stands out to me is just this. I think sometimes, and I think this is, starting to shift, especially in more holistic communities and stuff, is I sort of feel like as women, we're often just brought up with this idea that we go through this like monthly cycle and our period's going to suck and the days before are going to suck. We're going to feel bloated. We're going to have tender breasts. We're going to have cravings. Bleeding is not fun, blah, blah, blah. We get kind of like programmed this from a young age. And I feel like more and more as I've learned about hormones and stuff, I've really come to like respect and admire what my body can do. And the fact that having this monthly cycle allows us to like bring life into the world. And also that it doesn't need to be something that is super painful and that it shouldn't be something that dominates our lives in the way that you were talking about. There are ways that we can kind of bring balance back to this. And I just feel like this is so powerful because so many women, I think, suffer and often in silence. We're like, oh, this is just what I have to go through as a woman. And I think that it kind of like what you're talking about, there are options and ways that we can start to heal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I was terrified about menopause before I found this practice. I thought, if this is what my life has been like with periods, what is it going to be like when I start to lose them? Like, I'm going to be a crazy person. And I thought, how in the world am I going to get through this? But now that I have this practice, I feel like I'm watching women in menopause now that are thriving and like strong and beautiful and feel great and are loving this phase of their life. And no more hot flashes, no incontinence, no dryness, increased libido. So many things start changing and happening. And it's not just for women who are dealing with PMS and menopause. It's for like thyroid issues, for PCOS, for if you have infertility issues that are related to your hormones. We have so many hormone babies out there now because of this practice. And there are just so many ways that this can start to help with a range of hormone issues that women face.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just even being like in like a little bit earlier in my life stage, I think I went off birth control when I was 22 and then I just didn't get my period for 2 years. And there was a lot of just like testing and trying to figure out what's going on. Eventually a naturopath helped me get it back naturally, but then it came back really heavy, lots of PMS, et cetera, et cetera. So it was this whole journey of just trying to get a regular cycle that didn't kill me every month, essentially. And, going through that, I think at a young age before I haven't had children yet. So it's kind of this idea of like, oh, well, having children is going to be like horrible, like kind of the way you're talking about menopause. Like if this is what I'm going through on just a month to month basis, like throwing my system into this, like, crazy change is going to be so horrible. And I think now getting to a point where I feel like things are much more balanced and that type of thing, it's like, oh, okay. I think that I feel confident with my body's ability to take on this thing that it's really designed to do.
Yes.
And so I'm curious if we can talk a little bit more in depth just about the hormone side of things and how the yoga integrates into that. Because I think that there's a lot of people listening who have probably have their own stories similar to your story, similar to my story, where their hormones have been unbalanced and they felt, months or years of just like living with this can be so challenging. I'm curious if we can talk more in depth just about the different hormones, especially as women, that we experience through our cycle, and how the yoga can help us with that.
Yeah. So one of the things, in order to teach this and share this practice, we have to be trained by Dina, and Dina is very, very old school in how she approaches yoga and approaches her students. And she is the master, and she holds the secrets. She will reveal certain secrets and she holds the rest. One of the things that I was really hoping to get from the training that I took with her was details, like a lot of details about our cycles and what's going on hormonally and why this practice is helping and how it's helping. And she did not go through that at all. So one of the things that I've been kind of working on is trying to learn on my own. I've been inviting naturopathic doctors to come in and take my workshop. I've got like pelvic floor specialists and acupuncturists, energy workers, like anyone who deals with female health and reproduction and is also going through a phase in their life where this would benefit them. I'm trying to bring them into the fold so that I can start to hopefully offer more information to my students around exactly what's going on, what's happening here. So we did not really get into that piece of it. I'm happy to chat a little bit more about of what's going on, and maybe through the conversation we'll kind of figure out like how to explain it better to others. Mm-hmm. Because we do like 7 warm-ups, and then we've got about 14 of the exercises, but 3 of those are yoga nidras and meditation that are dealing more with like pituitary. So what I do understand from the limited information that she shared with us is that we're basically focusing, the majority of the work that we're focusing on is the ovaries. Though if you don't have ovaries, or if you've had a hysterectomy, you can still do this practice because we produce estrogen in other areas as well. And because of the way that the endocrine system communicates with each other, we can start to activate other things that will help to pull us back into that state of equilibrium. So Dina was even talking one time about someone who had like just a cell of their thyroid left because it was removed, that started to come to life again through the practice. It like started to produce again. So we're trying to communicate with the ovaries, thyroid, and pituitary, and we use different postures to do that, which then activates them through this dynamic movement of massage and release.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. I was thinking about how she's kind of like the keeper of this information, Dina Rodriguez is, and she's 93. I'm like, I hope she's passing this down to somebody. 93 is not young.
I know. But oh my God, if you saw her, you would never know it. She's passing it down to her children. They are going to be taking over from her. But she is like, when we trained, we were supposed to have like, I don't know, maybe let's just say 8 hours a day was the schedule. Some days she'd keep us like 11 hours because she just wanted us to get it perfect. And she wanted everyone to understand. And you don't go to lunch yet because you haven't done what I want you to do yet. She's very, very strict. And then she would go out after the 10-hour day and go to a book signing, go to a press release, go to the town square. We did like a big, where those pop-up things where people start dancing in the malls. We did like a flash mob.
Oh my gosh.
Flash mob hit practice in the middle of this square in Italy.
That's so fun. I guess that's like living proof that if you get your hormones balanced, that you can actually have like pretty good energy.
Oh, her energy is phenomenal. And her husband is 100 years old, and he helps her with her business. He emails people, he packages the books and sends them out. And he's doing the male version of hormone yoga therapy because they have that too, as well as one for diabetes. So it's
Wow, that's
yeah.
amazing. I need to get my hands on this book for sure. Hey everyone, we're just taking a quick break from the show to talk about Energy Bits. Energy Bits are spirulina tablets made of one ingredient, algae. Nothing added, nothing subtracted, just 100% plant-based algae nutrition. No sugar, no caffeine, no gluten, no soy, no additives, no GMOs, no preservatives, no binders, nothing artificial. Just 100% algae, 100% green, 100% healthy, and 100% pure. Pure and simple, the way food should be. They have high protein, high beta carotene, high iron, high chlorophyll, high antioxidants, and over 40 plus vitamins, including the B vitamins. They have electrolytes, including magnesium, potassium, and are a great source of essential fatty acids. Honestly, I could go on and on and on about how great Energy Bits are for you, and that's why I've decided to partner with them. If you want to learn more about Energy Bits or order some yourself, you can head on over to energybits.com to learn more. Use the code WANDERBARN to get 20% off your order. Once again, that's energybits.com and use the code WANDERBARN for 20% off your order. All right, back to the episode. So I'm curious with the practice, is it for women designed like in all stages of life and all stages of their cycle?
Yes. So pretty much from the time you're 35 on, your hormone levels start to decrease. And so anyone who wants to start it before then, before they even start to feel any symptoms, would very likely just ease straight through their transition without really any difficulty at all. So she recommends that that's a perfect time to start before you feel anything, because then you don't have to go through it. But really, you can come into it at any time. We have modified practices for teenagers if they need it. And we have modifications for a handful of conditions that need a little more support in this practice, or maybe don't need as much of an estrogen boost.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And you said that the practice is designed to be practiced like 4 or 5 times a week. And is it the same? Like once you kind of know the sequence, do you just practice the same sequence every single day?
It is exactly the same. And we always talk about how you have to do it from the very beginning. So you have to do the warm-ups every day. You have to do all of the Yoga Nidras and all of the meditations as well, because if you leave any component out, it isn't as effective. Although I will say it's still effective, but when the women who've been leaving things out bring it all back together, they notice more results, and they notice them coming in a little bit faster and a little bit stronger as well. I mean, I'm offering these workshops now over the course of 4 weeks. So it's like 2 hours each week, because the way I'm looking at this is you're learning an intricate dance, like a dance with so many little different nuances. And so we just go through each detail and practice in the weeks between to continue to build our understanding and muscle memory of it. And what I've noticed as I've broken this up into a 4-week process is that even when the women aren't doing the entire practice, they're coming back a week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, starting to recognize some symptoms going away and lessening. One woman hasn't had a hot flash since she started, and that was just 6 weeks ago. And 4 of those weeks we're still learning it. So it's quite something.
Yeah, it sounds like kind of like magic.
I know. She's like, well, if this is the only thing that happens, I'd say that was worth it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. Can you talk a little bit more, I guess, like about kind of like how it works and how it's kind of like how this particular practice is able to heal hormones so effectively?
So if I'm going to give you a little demonstration of the Bhastrika breath, which I've been thinking about how much do I want to share of the practice, because sometimes I think, it can, if you haven't done something before, it might feel a little bit overwhelming or like I can't do that. But we go through everything so slowly and break it all down. And I've got like little videos that I give you to help learn some of the techniques before you even arrive at the workshop, so that you have some time to practice stuff. And one key point that I think is so important to remember is that when you finish the workshop, you're still learning, right? There's so much that has to sort of get integrated and settle in. So after the workshop ends, you want to keep practicing and learning and memorizing and using your manual and all of these things. And it takes time. And we've been living with these issues for probably most of our adult lives. And if it takes a few more weeks after the workshop to really have everything kind of settle in, that is normal. I think I used my manual for like the first month every day after I had learned it. So the technique, one of the big techniques that we use is Bhastrika breath. And it's a very dynamic, strong inhale and exhale. And your belly, your abdomen moves a lot when you're breathing like this. So the belly moves out on the inhale. It pulls in as you exhale. And then we're doing different movements that will then also compress the area where the ovary is. And then we release out of that, and energy floods in because we do a special circulation of energy to direct that concentrated energy into the gland. And all of it, it's like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like you just start to feel yourself coming to life. So Bhastrika breath sounds like this. And we breathe like that for almost the entire time. It's probably 20 minutes of the practice. We breathe like that, 15, 20 minutes of the practice. So that, you can imagine, also is incredible for your digestion and for activation as well. It's incredibly enlivening. So energy is wonderful. Women are sleeping through the night. They're being energized throughout the whole day. And so we use that to start to activate ovaries. And then we have another special technique that we use for the thyroid, which is Ujjayi breath. But it sounds very different than an Ujjayi breath would in a more traditional yoga class. So if you're used to hearing that sort of ocean breath sound when people are in the room practicing together, this we take and we start to vibrate that. So we're still constricting the throat, but we're creating a really strong vibration, and then we're compressing the neck, drawing the chin in. So we're compressing that thyroid area. And we do a little bit of work side to side and back. So we get into parathyroid as well. And that one actually sounds a bit like a dying cow or something. It's for a very short amount of time. But that one sounds like this. I won't do any more.
It does kind of sound like a dying cow. That's a pretty accurate description for that.
And so that always lightens the mood, and all the girls always start laughing, and we have fun with that one. And then we use visualization and some energy techniques to activate the pituitary gland through Yoga Nidra, meditation, and the chakras. So all of it, when it comes together, becomes this beautiful dance within our body that allows for our innate wisdom to take over and figure out what needs to happen. So it's not like by doing a certain amount, you're going to increase the estrogen a certain amount, but everything affects everything else. So if we just lay the foundation of the work, our body takes over and does the rest.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's really amazing. I love the idea of like using breath work and meditation and some movement to really like help our bodies come into balance. And I think, like we were kind of saying before, people look for these like quick fixes and it's often in the form of a pill, but I don't know. It doesn't, I haven't heard of any pill that, that sounds like it works as well as this does in terms of balancing hormones.
Oh, no, I haven't either. I mean, the pill will take away some symptoms of certain things, but a lot of women who stick with the practice um, end up going off of their medication, whether it's for like a hypothyroid or if it's HRT, they're able to maintain like really incredible results just through the practice. And sometimes we're all in different places, right? So there are other ways to support it, which is why I try to pull all these different women in to my workshops, like nutritionists and dietitians and things as well. So there are ways that we can eat that help support us. And then we have to consider, the things that we're putting on our body as well. So if we're looking at it holistically, I think that there is opportunity for incredible change to happen. Incredible change.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea of like a daily practice that can, really help to just sort of like empower your body, because I think that, we were obviously like designed a certain way. And I think that our body is consistently seeking homeostasis, like to be in balance. And so many things that we do in our lives kind of put us out of balance, from like medication that we're taking, food we're eating, like you said, things we're putting on our skin, and then stress is a huge piece of that. I'm curious if you can talk about, because I know this is a big part of your offerings as well, is managing stress, and in terms of how stress can really impact our hormones.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the times that I started to get some symptoms back again was just last year at this time. My stepdad passed away, and the stress was bigger than any stress that I had felt in a really long time. And I couldn't even move my body probably for the first 2 days after finding out. And then I started practicing again, but my movement was very weak, and it wasn't. This practice works when it's really dynamic, and I just did not have that kind of energy in me. And so I noticed that as the stress came in, that happened, but I told myself, I'm just going to keep doing whatever I'm able to do. And eventually I'll build up my strength again. And I'm so grateful that I did that, because it was helping. I could feel the shifts happening as I was practicing. And if we are so in chronic stress, we have to manage that in order for our hormones to be able to find that balance that we give it an opportunity to when we do this practice. So Dina's included, a number of stress reducing exercises and breathing techniques in this training that we offer when we teach women the practice. But I have been working with stress reducing practices very closely now for about 20 years or so, maybe 25 years actually. And that's been a major focus for me just in my teaching before I knew anything about hormone yoga. Yoga Nidra, restorative yoga, meditation, these breathing techniques have been profoundly impactful in my mental health and my physical health. So I add to that part of my training. I always beef that part up a little bit now because I think that it's really important. So what I'm finding is that people are having a really hard time making more time for more practices in their life right now, right? I'm just always really, I mean, it's a struggle to make time for ourselves. So I think that one of the things that came from COVID was that I started asking what people needed, and they're like, well, I'm not going to be able to make another hour, but if you had like a little mini practice, I would love that. So I started these little half-hour stress reducing practices, and they're all different techniques, different breathing techniques. Some of it's yoga, most of it's yoga nidra, restorative yoga, meditation, but then I throw in some other techniques that I've learned along the way. And I try to encourage people to just take these little pockets of time. So even if it's a half hour that you don't have time for, then we all shower every day or every other day. Maybe not as much now that COVID is here, but hopefully you're still showering. And when you get into the shower, if you're in there for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, but you consciously connect to your breath and use some techniques that aren't going to, that you don't have to be eyes closed and seated for, but that are calming and quieting, that's a beautiful way to start bringing it into your day-to-day life. If you're in the car going to work or coming home from work, I often encourage people, sit in your car for 5 minutes before you go into work and use one of these techniques. You'll feel more calm and prepared, focused and ready to go to work, and you'll be in a better headspace. And then same thing on your way home for 5 minutes before you walk in the door, because as soon as you walk in the door, there's usually something you have to do. So for 5 minutes, sit in your car. Same thing. The breath can shift so much around how we feel and how we think and our perspective. So I work a lot with the breath and a lot with visualization as well. So I try to encourage women to find ways to drop in these little mini practices. A few minutes before you go to bed, you can do it in your bed or when you get up. And I started offering these 30-minute practices for a few reasons. One was for teachers who are saving us right now and keeping our children safe and socialized and learning. So I wanted to be able to do something to say thank you to them. So I'm offering all teachers 50% off of the cost of the stress reducing classes. And also I did it so that the HIIT women could have just this 1 hour practice. They do a half hour HIIT with me because we have a daily practice Monday through Friday. We meet in the morning on Zoom and we practice together. And then they get recordings that will last for the month that they register for, so that if they have to miss a class, but they still want the guidance, they can use that. And then that's only a half hour. So now they have another half hour where then they can go and watch the recording of the stress reducing practices. And it's been really helpful. I've been hearing from a lot of people, and I'm loving it too, because it's another way. Part of the stress right now is this lack of connection. And so we have this opportunity to connect each week and chat before class and after class. And I can't tell you, we've just been laughing and having such a wonderful time in the HIIT practices, and then having these really meaningful, wonderful connections in the stress reducing practices. And it's making a big difference, I think.
Yeah, no, I love hearing about that. And I think that it's such a great practice, particularly right now. I mean, we've lived in a stressful society for a long time, and the kind of go, go, go aspect of life is really challenging, I think, on our systems and for a lot of us. And there's definitely been this sort of, culture in our society of really like approving of people who are hustling, like the hustle and bustle, it's like the go, 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 work hard. And I think we can work hard and achieve great things in life while still taking care of ourselves. So finding that sort of balance and between like the work that we do and, the pleasure that we find in our lives from other things that are not, I guess, like driving income, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think particularly with this like global crisis that we've been in, there's been so much added stress, like so many layers of stress. And I know for me, like in the kind of early days of COVID, I have a lot of tools in my toolbox, and yet I turned to Netflix, wine, things that are not helping my adrenals, things that are not helping my parasympathetic nervous system. And I think it's interesting to see kind of how we cope with situations. And, especially for me, like this is like the biggest kind of global event that I've been a part of personally. So it's interesting to see like how I kind of chose to do that, especially in the early days. But I love that idea of coming together as a group and being able to support with stress techniques, and then to have those little suggestions for how we can just take little moments out of our day that can make a big difference.
Absolutely. We were just talking about this today. I meet with my teachers. We have like these big gatherings with the teachers who've been trained by them, and we just kind of talk and connect and inspire. And today we had the talk about how, like, it's okay if you chose the chocolate or the wine or the Netflix, it's okay. You can be kind to yourself and recognize that and come back. Just because we are, teachers or experts in certain fields, or, hold a certain level of what is the leadership, then there's this expectation that we don't also suffer or struggle or make bad choices or, feel a little bit lost sometimes. And it was just really good to connect with everyone about that. And then to remember, we do have these tools. And if you forget to pull that toolbox out, just recognize how you felt and what that looked like for you. And then maybe you make a different choice next time you sit down or you go to open the cabinet or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And so you've mentioned that you offer, workshops and sessions on this. Can you tell listeners a little bit more about those sessions and then where people can go to find them?
Yeah, I've scheduled it so that we either meet for 4 Saturdays from 10 to 12 Mountain Time, or 4 Sundays, same timing, 10 to 12. And I have pretty much booked class workshops to learn this technique all the way through till the end of June. And once you've registered and taken the course, which allows you access to Dina's manual where she breaks everything down and explains it to you. It also includes like a little cheat sheet so that you don't have to look at all the details and you can just see a little image of the posture and the number. And then we have a practice sheet that you get so you can track your practicing. I have a private Facebook group that when you complete the workshop, you can join so that you can connect with other women, ask questions, share articles and information, get inspired. And then I offer a refresher class each month for an hour and a half where we review all the details, because a lot of times what happens is like we learn something, but then we start to build in our own little habits and things. And the details are really important in this practice. So I just offer a refresher so you can come in and be like, oh, I forgot about that. I've been doing that wrong, and just kind of reconnect and get yourself back on track. And then I offer these daily classes. So I'm offering them through month-long passes, or if you just want to drop in, you can. But I've tried to make the rate reasonable so that even if you join later in the month, it's still really worth your time. And I send out recordings a couple times a week with some different information and cueing and things like that there. And all of this can be found on my website, which is bridgetteshaw.com. BRIDGETTE.com. shaw.com. And I also have my stress reducing practices up on the website as well. I've just created, like you can either go month to month, or you can do like a whole winter series, which would take you through 3 months. And so I'm trying to create lots of ways for us to really stay connected, because if you take the workshop and then you go off on your own, some people I think are able to like really stay motivated to continue by themselves. But I think most of us do better when we have the support of others around us. So that's what I'm trying to create, a community for us. I have some really big visions for what I see coming in the future with this that I'm really excited about, which involves a lot of the women I'm inviting in to take the practice so that they can be a part of it. And hopefully we'll be in a place in the world in the next few years where all of that can come to fruition. So
amazing. I love all of that. And you're doing such wonderful work. So keep it up. And thank you for this conversation today, Bridgette. This has been really inspiring to talk about this.
Well, thank you, Amanda. I am really grateful to be able to share this. I think one of the silver linings of COVID is that I am now able to reach women all over the world. We had women in Bahrain, women in Israel, women down in the States, women throughout Canada. Like I've got someone in Germany, and it's just been really cool to connect all over.
Yeah, that's amazing. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Matcha Mornings. To find links mentioned in this episode, show notes, photos, and more, head on over to wanderbarn.com/podcast/matcha-mornings. To be the first to know about brand new episodes of Matcha Mornings, subscribe on your podcast app. If you enjoyed this episode of the show, please leave a review or send me an email at wanderbarn@gmail.com with the subject line Matcha Mornings. To follow along with me, Amanda Kingsmith, you can find me on Instagram at Amanda Kingsmith to learn more about other fun projects I'm working on. To find more great podcasts like this one on topics such as travel, the business of yoga, cryptocurrency, and more, head on over to wanderbarn.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.